Thursday, September 17th, 2015. This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon, and tonight we present the third in our series of discussions on the Sephirot of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, the eighth Sephirah, Hod, which is called the Splendor and is the sphere of the intellect. Hod is considered the sphere of magic because it is the workshop in which astral preforms are created and sent to Yesod for eventual manifestation in Malkuth. It is presided over by the Archangel Michael, some say Raphael, and it's operated by the craftsman alchemist gods of various traditions: Thoth, Hephaestus, Vulcan, Tubal-Cain, and our Canaanite pantheon, Kusor and Khasis. It is also the sphere of the Elohim, the gods, and the Benai Elohim, the sons of the gods, and so we might say it is strongly pagan. We consider it Kusor's library, laboratory, and workshop. Once again, we will cite Dion Fortune, John Michael Greer, and Gareth Knight, and our own Hermetic Yoga book. So if you want to get something done magically, tonight we will visit the place where creativity flourishes. Hod, as that's spelled H-O-D in English, and as you know, that is just to the left side of Yesod, and what I'm going to do to start off with, I'm going to read what we have to say about Hod in our Hermetic Yoga book, and Hod, sphere of the intellect, creativity, and science, Mercury. Hod is the sphere attributed to Mercury and reflects mythological and astrological mercurial qualities and faults. We try not to operate in the sphere when Mercury is in retrograde. The mythological figure attributed here is Mercury, the messenger of the gods, and also various blacksmith and craftsman gods, such as Hephaestus, Vulcan, the biblical Tubal-Cain, and his Canaanite predecessor, Kusor and Khasis, who was secretly married to Anath, and the father of Shamgar, and also of the military-industrial complex. Kusor built the first boat for the Phoenicians. We consider Kusor to have been the first alchemist, and we picture him as such in our Hod icon. He represents your creative spirit and ingenuity. And when you visit him, he will inspire you to make things or to begin creative artistic projects. Under his inspiration, we built a small model of his first boat in the shape of an ibis, with its wings folded along the hull. And we use it in advanced path workings to fly over the paths we have already walked in previous astral journeys. Now you can see this on the altar top in our pathworking video, with its ibis beak prow aimed toward the soul door in the west. Hod is ruled by the Archangel Michael, and he should always be invoked when visiting this sphere. Now, for those of you who want to look at the pathworking video, which is very good, by the way, and we have an artistic tableau that shows all of the aspects of the 31st path leading to Hod and Hod itself in that video. But in order to do that, you're going to have to join the associate member program and sign up and take our lessons, and then the pathworking video is you're eligible to get that after you've completed the first 4 lessons. So a little bit of recruiting here for our mystery school. Now let's consider Hod in relation to the rest of the tree. Now, in order to get this firmly in your mind, we're going to go back to my colleague and sometimes mentor Lon Duquette's analogy that he derived from Plato, if you recall, and I think he used this in The Chicken Kabbalah, which is an excellent book, by the way, and The Chicken Kabbalah of Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford. Now, Plato came up with this idea of preforms existing in the higher dimensions. Preforms exist for any object that comes to shape in the earth, in Malkuth. And this was originally Plato's idea, and he used a chair as an example. There is an ideal form of a chair somewhere on the astral before the chair actually becomes manifest. There's the idea of the chair. Well, based upon this Platonic analogy, Lon talked about the way the chair comes about in a Kabbalistic terminology. And he starts off with God up in Kether, and God, the undifferentiated unity of God up in Kether, as saying, rest. And then down in Bria, the archangels, they say, God wants a chair, and this is how this whole thing percolates down, all the way down through the spheres, and eventually becomes a real chair in the real world. Now, let's using this analogy, let's go a little further. Let's use a corporate analogy here. Let's imagine 11-story. I say 11 stories because I'm assuming that you know that there are 11 spheres to the tree, at least in the inner order there are. So let's say we have an 11-story building, and at the very top of this building, there's a sign on the building that says L and Sons Furniture. Okay. Now, at the very top of the 11-story building, there's a penthouse, and that's where L goes, and he does come down and work in an office in Hesed, and obviously because you know the god name for Hesed is El, so he does come down and he works and he has this office in Hesed down in Yetzirah, but after work he goes up to his penthouse, up there in the top, and then, of course, he has a telephone up there and a speakerphone. So if he comes up with an idea while he's up in the penthouse, he can communicate the idea. Well, now the next floor down, below the penthouse, is where senior staff has their offices, and they have Hokmah and the office of Hokmah and then Binah, and this is senior staff, sort of the and then we got one man. He's in the office in Hokmah, and then we got a woman. She's in the office over at Binah. So we're gender balanced in senior staff here. So the old man up there at the top, if you want to think of him as an old man, the old man at the top calls down to senior staff. He hasn't come down to work yet, but so he calls down to senior staff and he says, "I'm thinking about rest." And senior staff, Hokmah knocks on Binah's door and says, "Hey, I think the old man wants a chair." So they call down into Yetzirah. They call down to Hesed. Well, the old man hasn't got down to his office yet, but Hesed puts it in motion. The old man wants a chair. Okay, so then down we go over to Hesed, over to Geburah, which is the sort of the action part of Yetzirah, where that's kind of the in military terminology that would be S3. That's operations, and so Geburah puts it in motion, makes a project out of it, and classifies it, makes a project out of it, and sends it on. And Geburah sends it on down to Tiphereth, where the advertising department and the media department gets together and they figure out what it's, how they're going to promote it, what they're going to do with it, and then they send it from there, to Tippereth, they sent it on down to NETSOC, which is materials. And NETSOC is the sphere of nature, of course, and that's materials. And so, well, we got to order so much wood. We got to have so much wood and so much upholstery, and we're going to need the tacks and the glue and everything that goes into making a chair. And so they got all that in stock, and then they have that ready to go. Send it on over to HOD, which is the sphere we're working on tonight. Now, HOD is the engineering department. And HOD is the engineering department. They have the drawing boards. I guess nobody uses drawing boards anymore. They have the CAD/CAM computers, and they also have. And in HOD, there's not only is there the engineering department with the CAD/CAM computers, but there is also a library for reference material. There is a laboratory for coming up with various chemical solutions and things like that. Laboratory, and there is a workshop for building prototypes. And this is very important. So they actually they can come up with the blueprints, and they can come up with with all of the necessary chemical substances or whatever. And they have this workshop to build the prototypes, the machine shop, and everything else. So they can turn out the hardware, whatever. So they come up and they build the prototype, and they come up with the blueprints. So where do they do with them? They send it on down because the orders come down from the top that we're going to build a chair, and they send it down to YESOD, over to YESOD, and that's where it actually gets manufactured. And what happens to it after it's manufactured? It goes right down the 32nd path, and it shows up on the showroom down in Malkuth, where you and I can go and buy it, because you and I all have a little bit of God in us, and God wants a chair for us, and so we got the chair there, and we can go in and buy it. Now, I know this is a kind of a crass analogy, but it kind of gets some of the ideas we want to get across, because what we have here is if you could think of this, most of us have seen corporate org charts. I know we used to do them all the time where I used to work, because Andrea and I both. And so you've kind of got an idea of how this thing breaks down as far as dimensions are concerned. Because remember, this tree is 4-dimensional. So if you want to think about how it functions, you can use this 11-story building analogy. And now, talking about HOD a little bit more here. One of the main attributes of HOD, of course, is Mercury. That's the planetary attribute and the astrological attribute and the mythological attribute. Now, Mercury is a very interesting planet symbolically. And this you can sort of think about. Mercury has a dark side, and it has a hot side. It does not rotate. It has a side that is always facing the sun, and it is hotter than blazes on that side of Mercury, and colder than the proverbial. Well, I was going to say witches something or other, but I better not do that. On the other side, and now you can, if you're one of the early science fiction writers, you say, well, there's a little belt around the middle where you could just barely manage to survive because that in between the dark side and the cold side. But no, I don't think so. But the important thing about this symbolically is this: Mercury has very definitely a tremendous duality, and that duality carries through because there's just as much good and light and good and creative ideas and all coming out of Mercury. But conversely, there is a great deal of evil and that comes out of Mercury, especially when we look at the, as we mentioned before, the military-industrial complex. Because This is a perfect example of the two sides of Mercury. And all of this cleverness and all of this intellect goes into making weapons of destruction and weapons of mass destruction, and creating things like modified food and all of these scientific what we originally thought were scientific miracles that have turned out to be not really so much good for us. This sort of thing is all mercurial, and so Mercury is the sphere of science and the sphere of ingenuity, creativity, inventiveness, and yet it has that dark side. The archetypal villain of Mercury would be the mad scientist, It's alive, Fritzo, it's alive, oh yeah. The typical mad scientist with the steampunk goggles and the Tesla coils crackling in the background. That's the evil archetype of Mercury. Now, another aspect of Mercury which we mentioned just as we started here is the pagan aspect of Mercury. And this is one that, by the way, Dion Fortune spends a lot of time in her book on the mystical Kabbalah. She spends a lot of time philosophizing about this. And Gareth Knight, who knew her very well and draws upon her, he simplifies a lot of her philosophical and psychological meanderings in his practical guide to Kabbalistic symbolism. But all of them, Dion Fortune, Gareth Knight, and John Michael Greer, they all agree that Mercury is the sphere of the gods. And this is very, very important, and especially important to magic. Because in magic, as I'm sure you have all learned by now, although we may be nominally Christian, and we may be nominally Jewish, and we may be nominally, like the Buddhists are nominally Buddhists, but Tibetan Buddhists, but we have our work is done through lesser deities and entities, angels, gods, goddesses, elementals, and sometimes even demons. If you got a whip and a chair to handle them. But so this is really Hod is the realm of the pagan pantheons, and it's Dion Fortune goes into a great deal amount of psychological meandering about this, but I want to read you what Gareth Knight has to say about it here, so you can get a little more of a take on it. He says, "Thus it is that man anthropomorphizes his gods. The diverse aspects of God have their sphere of action in the lesser worlds of the Sephirah Netzach, but Netzach is a force, not a form Sephirah. Therefore, the forces of nature and the internal forces of man are given picture images, and these images are formed in the Sephirah Hod. It matters not whether the forms be gross or naive. One such as the image of God the Father is an old man with a patriarchal beard and robes, or whether it be highly symbolic and subtle, such as the representation of the same concept as a point within a circle, or the smooth point, an image is used, and all mental images are formed under the lower cohering principle of Hod. So, all the God forms belong to Hod, just as all the God forces belong to Netzach. That's why I say in the corporate furniture building analogy, we got all the materials, we got all the wood for the chair and all the fabric and all the tacks and all the glue. They're all over in Netzach, but we're going to send them over to Hod and we're going to put the chair together. Now, the skeptic may object that all forms are reflected images of the physical world, and so in the unlikely event of a skeptical materialist being a Kabbalist, he would no doubt insist that all forms belong to Malkuth. Given the materialist's premises, this would be correct. But the Kabbalah is based implicitly on an idealist philosophy and holds that forms are first conceived on the inner levels and subsequently concrete into other forms. This is no place to go into, he says, an analysis of the main watershed of philosophical speculation. So he's avoiding anything further on that. But what he basically, Gareth Knight, I started to call him Kenneth Grant, I better not do that. What Gareth Knight's getting at here is that forms are higher than forms of beauty. Plotinus, by the way, went into that quite a bit, into the nature of beauty. And one thing that I learned from Plotinus and also from this speculation about these forms is that works of art, beautiful sculptures, beautiful paintings, works of art, are, if they are preserved, and they should be, have a permanence to them because, and they don't fade away just because the paint has dried and the sculpture is finished and all of that. That doesn't mean that decay is necessarily setting in. It may, but if it's preserved, what happens here is that it lives on, and the reason why it does is because it lives on in the appreciation of everyone who sees it. Now, this is a concept in aesthetics that I hope I can get across. I know aesthetics is something that there's a whole school of thought called aesthetics. And in fact, there's a whole academic school called aesthetics. And I remember Fred Adams was fascinated by aesthetics, and I never was able to grasp some of their concepts, but this is a concept I do grasp, and it is in the realm of aesthetics. So, consequently, a beautiful piece of artwork has a permanent life. As long as it survives, it has a permanent life, because every time we look at it, we are inspired, and it lives. And it lives as a preform, because this is the way art and beauty are created from previous art and beauty as a model. And we're just mentioning this film that we're going to watch tonight, this Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is a film based on Lovecraft's dream cycle stories, primarily artwork. And I noticed when I saw the cover of this that this artist, I better mention his name if I'm gonna talk about this. This artist, let's see, his name is let's see. Jason Thompson. He's also got a graphic novel on the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. And his style is inspired by the same illustrator that illustrated Lord Dunsany's stories. And, of course, Dream Quest from Unknown Kadath is very much influenced by Lord Dunsany. And this artist, Thompson, has replicated Sidney Syme, the illustrator of Dunsany's fantasies, has replicated this style, and he's replicated it beautifully, at least from what I can see from the jacket on this. And this is what I'm trying to get at about how art lives. Art and beautiful art and beautiful sculpture has a permanence, because every time somebody sees it, they internalize it, and then it influences them, and it has a life. And so then it, in turn, reflects on the higher world. the higher worlds, are part of it, because we have all these dimensions within us. The tree of life is also the human God person, the Adam Kadmon. You are the tree of life, and that's why those works of art that exist in Malkuth can also influence the higher planes, and then on down again, and perpetuate it. And I think that this, if this is understood by artists, I think that this is an inspiring concept. And if I don't get anything else across in the discussion of Hod, if I manage to get that across, I'll be satisfied. Now, another thing about this business of the gods, the sphere of the gods, Hermes Trismegistus said, "The gods of the zodiac are eternal, but man creates the gods of the earth sphere." And Dion Fortune goes into great lengths psychologically and mythologically to try to sort of explain this. Although one of the things that disappoints me about Dion Fortune is she uses so many Jungian ideas and so much Jungian terminology, but she just doesn't like to mention Carl Jung at all, and that is kind of disturbing. But what we're trying to say here is, and what Dion Fortune and Gareth Knight and to some extent John Michael Greer are saying, is that we do create the gods. And Dion Fortune has quite a long piece in her article where she talks about how we create these gods, and then later on they can be revived. Now this is like, in a way, like we talked about the other night about the little girl that goes out in the woods and finds the fairy sitting there on the toadstool crying, and she says, "Well, why are you crying, little fairy?" And she says, "Nobody believes in me anymore." And the little girl says, "Well, I do." And so the fairy, brightens up and says, "Well, as long as one little girl believes in us, we'll still be here, But we can, and we can bring these, even though these fairies may be long dead, we can bring them back to life. We can bring them back to life by believing in them and being fascinated by them, and good old J.R.R. Tolkien, he sure did a good job helping out on that, bringing all the fairies and the elves and everybody back to life. And it's the same thing with the pagan pantheons. We have bringing these ancient pagan gods back to life, because all you have to do is dust them off and maybe wipe the dust off of them and touch up the cracks in the plaster and sure enough, they will come back to life, and they will exhibit as much life as you put into them. Now this, of course, in the East, in India, they call this Bhakti Yoga. This is the yoga of worship. And we say constantly, over and over and over again, no, we don't worship the pagan gods. We don't worship them. Yes, but we don't worship them, but you can personally. You can personally worship them, and actually by doing this, you can bring them to life. And you can not only can you bring them to life for yourself, but if you believe in Jungian concepts, the collective unconscious and the universal consciousness, you can help that archetype. You can help bring that archetype to life, and they will have more and more and more power. And this is one of the powers of magic. And so Hod is the place where this goes on. And if you don't think this is Kabbalistic, well, you're wrong, because if you notice, in Hod, the order of the angels in the sphere of Hod is the Benai Elohim, the sons of God. And John Michael Greer goes into a nice discussion about the word Elohim and what it actually means, and he breaks it down letter by letter. But Elohim is a very curious word. It's basically it's feminine, but it's also plural. It's a masculine plural on a feminine word, so it's translated, and the best translation of Elohim is gods stroke goddesses. And we are working right now. Professor Solomon and I are working on the article for the next volume of the yoga book called Jesus Christ, Pagan Priest King, and we're making quite a case in that article. And in fact, the whole article stems from it. The difference between El and Jehovah, and this is tremendously important at Hod, because Hod is where the Elohists really hold. And what I mean by the Elohists is the original vegetarian gods of Genesis, the lesser gods below El. El is the Father God, and his wife, Lady Asherah of the Sea, the two of them ruled together. And in Genesis, they were the ones that actually created man and woman, and their sons were the Benai Elohim, the sons of God, which are also considered to be the fallen angels. And there's quite a bit of very, very interesting material in the Bible, and in the King James, not just the apocryphal works, but also in the King James. There's a lot of this material in there. And about 6 months ago, I had a business meeting at Musso and Frank's in Hollywood, luncheon meeting, and I was late for the meeting because there was a riot outside Noah. The film Noah was showing, and the fundamental Christians were out there rioting against Noah, and made me late for my meeting in Musso and Frank's. But doggone, I mean, that film Noah, that's in a lot of ways very, very accurate. One of the things that was not accurate is that Tubal Cain was not the villain that they made him out to be in the movie. He was one of the good guys. Let me just read this last thing that Gareth Knight has to say about the. If I can find it here. About the Elohim, the fallen angels. Yeah, here it is. As a last consideration, there is an interesting tradition which says that the Benai Elohim, the sons of God, were sons and daughters of other spheres who came down to earth in very early times and mated with humans, producing a race of wisdom, the like of which has never been seen since. The mating and the offspring, though holy at first, degenerated into evil beings of great power, who in the end had to be destroyed. This fact is said to lie behind many strange legends of all races, and the fact that these beings were androgynous and could use either sex at will is no doubt the foundation of such legends as that of Sodom and Gomorrah. The magical image of Hod is, of course, the hermaphrodite, and the tracing, though of such correlations, is often very strange. The magical alphabet of symbols is a pursuit of great interest and fascination. Though, as with all fascinating pursuits, particularly esoteric ones, it is well not to let this one's enthusiasm go too unleashed, for there is a very treacherous and shifting boundary between the virtue and the vice of law and truth and falsity. Yeah, very interesting, because the fallen angels, as many of you know who've been listening to our broadcast, the fallen angels are actually in many ways analogous to us ourselves. We are, in many ways, the fallen angels. And the fallen angels, they when we say they lusted, when the Bible says they lusted after the daughters of men, no, they didn't lust after the daughters of men, because the daughters of men were not all. If you're godlike, the daughters of men were not that attractive. And of course, as you know, later on, when the fallen angels came down, they taught the daughters of men how to put on lipstick and eyeshadow, and because they really were not as comely as the Bible said they were until they taught them how to fix themselves up. And so, the point that I'm making here is that they didn't lust after the daughters of men. What they lusted after was the adventure of the flesh, the adventure, the challenge, the adventure of living. This is something that discorporate beings don't have. And this is why Malkuth, the kingdom, is so important, and why we mentioned this before. Malkuth is where things get done. Malkuth is where you come to life. You know, when you're dead, you can do a lot of thinking, a lot of contemplating, a lot of ruminating, and you can think about, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again, and then of course you go right back and do it again. But the kingdom is important because it's where it gets done. It's where you play the game, and they wanted to play the game. But the problem is, if you play the game too hard, if you dissipate yourself and you get gluttonous, you get fat and you get sick and so all of the various things that are so much fun to do have a dark side, and the more you get fascinated with the idea of how many toys you can collect and how much sex you can indulge in and how much power you can acquire, there's a devolvement here. You're moving away from the spirit, and this is what's meant by the fallen angels. And this is why we are analogous to the fallen angels. And one of our inner secrets is you can say is not only can we say you are God, but you're also a fallen angel, you know, and that's one of the things that you should be aware of in Hod is this, the creativity of the fallen angels. This creativity has to be tempered with mercy and compassion, and it should be turned toward the side of the light. And you should, and you'll certainly, especially as you get older, you'll certainly find that the more you move toward the light, the healthier you are, and the more you will actually learn to enjoy life. I'm reminded of this cartoon. There's a cartoon in runs in the Sunday Funnies. With Jeremy, the teenager, and he's Jeremy is out on the patio, and his folks, which are they're in their 40s and 50s. They're out at the barbecue, and they're cooking hamburgers, and they're having this barbecue picnic out there, and Dad's got his arm around Mom, and he looks over at Jeremy, and he says, it doesn't get any better than this. and Jeremy suddenly jumps up and screams, "What?" You know, and I thought when I saw that, I thought, I'm going to cut this out and save it, because this is, quite frankly, this tells it all. If you could just somehow or other, when I was a kid, I thought the same way. I felt the same way. I mean, middle class America enjoying a barbecue in the backyard. This can't be all that it's all about. But when you think about it, here's the family together, doing it. The family together having a picnic in the back, a barbecue in the backyard. You know, really, when you get right down to it, that is what it's all about. It doesn't get any better than that. That's it. Really, the truth. But Jeremy, he's the teenager, and he doesn't see that at all. He can't see that, and so we have to learn to to appreciate the simple things of life, and good fellowship, and all, and move toward the light. I know that sounds a little preachy, but now in our path working to HOD, which some of you have taken, especially those of you who have the DVD, and in our path working to HOD, we come up the 31st. We walk the 31st path. That's the path of Sheen, through the desert of fire, and on up through the valley of the bones, and then through the city of the tombs, and then we approach, when we finally get to HOD. And this is one thing we do in our path workings, by the way, that other people sometimes don't do. We actually take you to the sphere and give you the experience of the spirit along with the path, because that's what the path is. It goes to the sphere. So why not do that? So when we get to this, the great library, it's on top of a huge mesa, and there's a scale, a bronze scale that comes down. That's the only way to get up. And on this scale, you have to get on one of the plates of the scale, and if you get on one of the plates of the scale, and you manifest your the side of your opposite sex, your anima or your animus, depending upon what your gender, and balance those scales by manifesting your other side. And this goes right along with the idea of Mercury, of the hermaphrodite. Actually, the hermaphrodite is a symbol in Mercury. It's not a symbol of a transsexual or anything like that. That's not what is meant by it. It's meant by the symbolism of the mercurial hermaphrodite is the two genders that are in all of us. Because one of the things you have to learn to do in magic, and this, of course, is under the influence of Carl Jung, one of the things you have to do is you have to realize the side of you that has the attributes of the opposite sex. Now, Jung referred to these as the animus for the man and the anima for the woman. There's a lot of psychological projection that goes on between the two, and whatever. But because when you get a terrible crush on somebody back when you were younger, we've all had this experience when at a certain age, usually a teenage experience, where we get madly in love with some girl or some boy, and just madly in love with them. And what we're doing when we do that is we're projecting our animus or our anima onto this other person. And if they are clever enough, and I think young girls take courses sometimes in doing this, and how to let him reflect, how to let me reflect his anima back onto him, because if the girl is or the boy is clever enough to play along with that projection, then you can really, really go head over heels in love with them. and it's very, very hard to realize. You suffer from this infatuation until something finally gets you to realize that this is not your anema or your this is not your anema or your anemus. This is another human being, and that's something you need to learn to do. That's part of the process of individuation. Anyway, when you can balance it, then the scales will let you go up to the top of the library. And in the library, what we have in our pathworking, in the library, we have all the books and all the scrolls and all the clay tablets and everything that ever been written, and it's all there in a language you can read. And but right in the center is a great big well, because Mercury is a water temple. And right in the center is a big well, and over the top of the well hangs an armillary sphere, a clockwork armillary sphere of the whole universe, or at least our universe, our solar system. And that's reflected down in the well. And you can look down in the well, that's the well of truth, and you can look down in the well and you can see the solar system and the universe reflected in that well. And you can see the past and the future in that well, in a general sense. Now, in our pathworking, we have down in the basement. You can hear the Tesla coils crackling, and you can smell the ozone from the alchemical laboratory, and you smell the chemicals. And down there is where Kusor has his alchemical workshop, and so that's our version of Hod. And you can discuss the tiers of the library are held up by great heads, these great attenuated head sculptures of the great philosophers of this age and earlier ages. And you can go to these heads, and you can discuss with them. You can have discussions with them. So this is the way we represent the sphere of Hod. If you go there on a pathworking, and you can get information, about yourself and information about things. It's kind of our version of Google. and or Wikipedia. So, but the difference between between our version of Hod and Wikipedia and Google is that this, if you remember, Socrates said, we don't learn anything. We just remember. While going along with that, there is so much information buried in your memory, in the deepest parts of your memory. You have no idea how much pretty valuable information about yourself and about the world in general is buried way down in the deepest regions of your subconscious. And once you start accessing it, and our pathworkers are a very good way to do that. Once you start accessing this remembered information, you're going to be amazed at what it is that you already know. And now, Hod, as I said, is the sphere of creativity. This is where the plans are made, and this is where the prototypes are created. Every time I go, and you can do this you don't have to just do this in a pathworking. You can do this in your yoga. You can go when you go up to Hod. You can go in the sphere and talk to Kusar. Every time I go in there, he's got a bunch of projects that he wants me to do, and I'm overdue on some of them. And I almost kind of want to skip Hod sometimes, because I know the first thing he's going to say when I get in the workshop is, well, what are you doing on this? Or when are you going to do this? He bugged me for a year to get my signet ring finally made, and and I finally did it. So but he's got a couple of other projects that he wants me to do that I am behind on, but he'll come up with some fantastically good ideas, and then as you go higher up, you may run into entities that will say, oh, that isn't that important. You got something else to do, and so you have a whole these gods, which all of their work kind of ends up manifesting down in Hodd, but which is the workshop of the Yetzirah, or the astral plane. So I think that at least gives you an idea of what the sphere is like and what we can do with it. And now next week, if we are fortunate, we'll have Karim El-Kusa calling in and talking about his books. That's Jesus the Phoenician, and the Phoenician Code, and Pythagoras the mathematician. But I don't know, because Kasim's in town. He hasn't checked in with me yet, so I'm not sure he's going to call in. And if he doesn't, we'll do Netzach. We'll go over to the sphere of nature where Astarte lives, and where all the materials are nature put together, and we'll do Netzach, and that will be always a beautiful place, as being the sphere of nature. So until then, good magic, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.